Welcome to our sound for video session. We have a couple of us here today. Michael is our co-host here today. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Curtis. Great to be here.
Great to have you. So let's go ahead and jump over to our agenda real quick, and then we'll come on back, and we have a lot of things to talk about here. First of all, we have a new wireless fundamentals course coming. And actually, Michael, do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, Curtis. So, Curtis and I in the background, as a lot of you know, he has an excellent school called Learn Light and Sound. And we had been talking and developing together a brand new course, which is the Wireless Fundamentals course. So we're busy in the background, working together as far as in production and filming and coordinating with that. And really just, with the intention of giving the necessary and fundamental wireless necessary to be successful on a range of production sets. So we're very excited about it, and it should be really something very valuable, I think, for a lot of people in all ranges and all different types of productions.
Yeah, good. And it's not just so. How much do you think we'll focus on specific gear versus? Yeah, how much do you suppose we'll just focus on specific gear? So like a Rode Wireless Go and a electrosonics and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Curtis. I mean, there is so much wide range of different types of wireless equipment, especially in today's marketplace. I mean, I think we're in this really fortunate time with all of this brand new technology coming down the pipe and all of these amazing tools that didn't exist like 5 years ago. So really, most of this all still falls under the fundamental principles, as I'll call them, of the shared RF landscape. So there will be some mentions of different wireless systems across all price platforms, from more of your budget conscious type wireless solutions, which definitely have their place, all the way up to higher end. But I think the core fundamentals underneath that is really understanding how to best choose and operate any given system and their particular purpose. Because the manufacturers, they do an excellent job as far as innovation and creating the tools that we need to use, but deciphering that information and really helping implement that into your system is, I think, where this course will fill a lot of the holes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I definitely, I feel that for sure, because I know that, I bought my first wireless systems knowing nothing really about, just having a consumer's understanding of radio frequency and, just figuring that, oh, this 2.4 gigahertz system sounds amazing. I don't have to futz around with choosing frequencies and, blah, blah, blah. And yay, that's really convenient. But there's some costs to that as well. And, just understanding those fundamentals, I think, makes a huge difference, especially as as you start to move to different levels of production where maybe a 2.4 gigahertz system isn't really appropriate or is not going to serve you well necessarily. So
yeah, and on the flip side of that, you could also say the same thing for some of the higher end systems that you see, like, such as the new Shure Axient system, which is creating a lot of buzz with its quadversity capabilities and the way that it auto finds frequencies. And then, of course, your industry standards, electrosonics, also your Zaxcom systems, and really just knowing when do I need that type of system and how do I best implement these systems in those environments.
yeah. Exactly. Cool. All right. Well, we did have some questions that were submitted ahead of time that focus a little bit on wireless. I wonder if we could throw those your way, Michael. Is that cool?
Hey, I'll do my best.
All right. Let's take a look at the first one here. All right. First up from Antonio. This is actually a series of 4 questions, so we'll kind of run through these one by one. But first of all, Antonio asks, where is a good place to understand the basics of wireless frequencies? And he's referring to books, videos, podcasts, etc.
Yeah, and I think, that's a great question, Antonio. And the first thing to do when researching and trying to find out where the wireless frequencies exist, especially as it pertains to wireless microphones, is you can actually go to the FCC's website and you should be able to download a RF spectrum chart, because you've got frequencies going all the way from the VHF starting at 75 to 76 gigahertz or kilohertz, excuse me, and then moving into your 200 kilohertz range, and then the UHF, which goes from 470 to currently 608. And then there are also your wireless frequencies in your guard bands in the 600 area for licensed and unlicensed users. Then you have your 941 bands, and then of course your 2.4 and even above of that. So the best thing to do really, first of all, is understand that all these frequencies exist, no matter how they're labeled, whether it's called Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or what they brand name the technology on the same RF frequency spectrum. And you should be able to find those charts online. And I bet you at the end of the stream, we'll be able to put a link below where everyone could download that.
Excellent. And then, so if you're in the United States, that would be the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. If you're outside of the United States, your government website should have the, some equivalent of whatever the governing body is that takes care of communications should have that. So, Michael, we did get a question here. Actually, I'm going to adjust my levels a little bit. I guess we're a little imbalanced here. I'm a little bit louder than you, so I can pull down a touch, or
yeah, and I can come up. How's that? That should make things a little better.
Let's see. Let's get a Daniel. If you could give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a little note there, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's
all
right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's head back to the questions here. What's up next? So next up from Antonio, where is a good place to get the basics of audio levels in sound recording? So mic levels, -10, which I think is a reference to -10 dBV.
-10 dBV, yeah, which is a consumer line level.
Right. Line levels, stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
And then the line level is, you'll hear as the +4 dBu, which has to do with the impedance of the output, or which is the load. So it's a really great question because, a good rule of thumb, first of all, when using those is just know that mic generally is going to go into mic level, and line level will go into line level. And keeping those inputs and outputs cohesive and understanding what type of input or output is on the equipment that you're using usually will be available in the manual. So if you're starting with a basic setup and you're not really that familiar with line or mic level, a good starting point is go to the manual and see, what kind of output level is this? In your input source, whether it's a field recorder or something like that, you'll want to make sure that that level is set at that corresponding level. From there, you also have to think about things such as unity gain, proper gain staging. And a lot of the things in this question, I think, really come down to a fundamental understanding of audio. And to learn that, if you're new to sound and wanting to get that sort of foundation, my best recommendation would be online courses. I mean, of course, there is a lot of information you can get online, with Curtis Judd's YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel, and there are other valuable content creators out here creating a platform. But at a certain point, you do need to learn and understand the fundamentals. So you might want to think about, hey, do I want to make a career in this and look at going to a formal college or audio school, or obviously learn light and sound, Curtis's school, where you can actually take fundamental audio courses there and learn about audio basics. I think some of those are embedded in some of your videos. Isn't that right, Curtis?
Yeah. We haven't talked as much about, -10 dBV versus +4 dBu, consumer versus pro line level, if you will. But generally, if you get, if you're working with line level interconnects, as long as it's one of those types, you generally have enough freedom to get where you need to go. But we haven't been into it a lot deeper than that.
And you also, and a good way to also think about to answer that question is, the lowest input level typically would be an instrument level, such as like an electric guitar, and it's often referred to as a high Z input, or a very high impedance input, such as a 1/4-inch connector out of a guitar. And then after that, you have a mic level input. And there are varying mic levels, but a good rule of thumb and starting point is to think, okay, instrument level, mic level, and then you're going to go to a consumer line level and then a professional line level. And differentiating those two is also very important, because I have, speaking of some wireless equipment in my workflow, that I actually have to change it to the -10 dBV on my output of my mixer recorders, because the input is a consumer line level. And what to make things even more interesting, and I'm talking about the Sony UWP-D11 wireless, is it indicates it as a line level, but does not just specifically say which line level it is in the manual.
Interesting. So it can be tricky, and that's why it's a great question. I think.
Well, you'll hear it too. You'll hear it because I'm sure we're all guilty of, or have been, more importantly, thrown into a situation. I recently did a mixing project for a live stream, and it was a lot of fun. And I was thrown into some gear that wasn't my kit. And they had this Zoom setup where they were sending a feed off of, it was a Soundcraft mixer that had an aux output, which is a line level output, going to a mic level transmitter. And that transmitter then, because it was one of these plug-on types, and I think the manufacturer was Sennheiser, which is a very excellent brand, but the idea was this was a budget-conscious 2.4 gigahertz. It had no trim settings. It had no frequency coordinating sessions. You just plug it in, and here it is, this line level, and this board did not have a mic level option output, because this is a very basic, it was a pretty nice mixing board for what it was. It was a Soundcraft 16 series or something. But anyway, so I was kind of stuck in this situation where I had to feed this line level to this mic level input. And as you guys know, that's a very tight space just to even make it audible. So it wasn't a lot of fun.
So I'm curious though, how did you solve that one? Did you use an attenuator?
We just went with that. We didn't. It was too late. On the day, a lot of the times you're going to get thrown into a situation in sound and audio where you're just going to have to work with what you got and do the best that you can. Stay calm and make it work. I could have put my hands up and say, "Oh wait, this is the run," or something like that, which I would have not done. But in that scenario, the best case was move forward. Plus, they had done other streams in the past with that same setup. So that I wasn't present, but then it got fixed the next one. So, because I caught it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Good. So did that mean clipped audio, or how did it come out? Or did you just have to attenuate big time on the output?
Let's just say it just sounded a little hot. It kind of, if you can successfully, make it to where it's not horrible. You just don't ever want to do it. But yeah, so it sounds a lot like a tube compressor with the threshold down really aggressively, and it kind of smashes it is kind of the best way I could describe it. I'm sure you're familiar with that kind of sound that happens when you mismatch levels.
Yep, been there. Okay, let's go back to Antonio's questions here and see what we have up next.
Yeah.
Could you explain camera hops? My boss mainly uses Lectrosonics SRBs with the SM and SMD systems, and the whole concept of camera hops and wireless audio is still confusing to me. So let me just give you a little more background there. He's working in it sounds like mostly corporate, or maybe it's, I don't remember. Not real clear on what it is, but the camera operator's working with kind of the entry-level cinema cameras like the C300 and I think an FS7. Those kind of like your owner-operator type of cinema cameras. Yep. And so they're doing camera hops using the Electro gear.
Yeah. So it's a great question, because to answer the first part of the question is a camera hop is nothing more than a wireless signal feed to a camera. So there are two components with that. You have the transmitter, which is coming from the source, whether it be the mixer bag or mixer, or the source that is sending the audio. So that output is sending to that transmitter, and then it is wirelessly being sent to the camera. And then the camera has typically a battery powered, or maybe it has DTAP options on the camera, or other power options that allow you to send one or two channels. Now, the SR series and Lectrosonics that you're talking about, Antonio, can carry 2 channels audio, which can have a benefit for multiple mixes and reasons. But that's the first thing to understand. It's not different really than a wireless system, maybe from a talent coming to a sound mixer using a sound bag. It's just that the levels are a little different coming out of the mixer typically, and then the wireless receiver is mounted to that camera.
And that's it. It's just another fancy name for,
Yeah,
I mean, doing the same thing actually, really. Okay.
exactly.
Cool. Cool. All right. And then Antonio, I think, had one more question here. Could you explain frequency blocks?
Certainly. So the block system comes from Lectrosonics. All the manufacturers use different systems to allocate the bandwidth of the particular wireless system that you're using. So a block system is about 28 megahertz, and it made me realize earlier when I was talking about RF, I was saying kilohertz. It was supposed to be megahertz. So it's about 28 megahertz spacing in a particular block, and what that means is that those wireless systems, the transmitters and receivers, must coordinate on those same blocks. And then they give those blocks numbers such as 470, 19, 20, 21, and now blocks are called bands in Lectrosonics. Now that they moved to a wide band, which is around 90 megahertz, it typically has about 3 blocks. And then some systems are using the full 470 to 608 for US as far as the width is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's just a way of dividing it up and helping you to understand, okay, if I'm going to be using this transmitter, I need to be using this receiver, right?
That's right.
And you have room, space,
Yeah.
RF space within there that you can tune them to within
And
there.
Antonio is obviously doing a good job doing a lot of research and so forth. Just the fact that he knew about blocks, because you'll see sound mixers online and so forth say, hey, what blocks are good in this city, or some of these terms. And that's why it really is important to know what this terminology is, because knowing if someone's talking about blocks, then they're talking about electrosonic systems in, those 28, average megahertz range.
Cool. Cool. All right. And Antonio, I saw you here earlier. There he goes. Yep. Thanks for answering. So thanks for the question, Antonio. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Heading back to our questions here. Next from Etienne. In a few days, this one's a tough one, and it's not exactly wireless related, but kind of distantly related to wireless. But in a few days, I'll join a 3-day shooting, which will be my first one since the beginning of the COVID period. I'm a little bit concerned, not only by the technical challenge. The short is literally a long scene with 6 actors involved in a meeting shot with 2 cameras simultaneously, but also because we will stay all along in a confined space. Hiding lobs is always a stressful challenge to me, but COVID conditions make it worse. So all crew members will wear masks, but actors obviously won't. How does it go nowadays on set? Do actors temporarily wear a mask each time you have to readjust their lob? Or do you wear FFP2 instead of a surgical mask when you have to get close to them, or simply because the air will be full of micro droplets after a few takes? I suppose actors and crew being tested regularly helps a lot on professional sets, but that will not be the case in my upcoming shooting.
That's a great question. There's a lot of questions in that question.
Yeah. What's your thought on that first?
Well, I mean, there's 2 parts to that question. I think, they're talking about 6 actors in a 2-camera setup, and it sounds like all of them are going to need to be wired, and there's a little bit of anxiety when doing so. Mm-hmm. And not only for the fact that it sounds like this person might be, newer when it comes to, working in sound and wiring individuals, because I can relate to that, because that's how I felt when I started. But then there's also the COVID protocols and all of the safety measures, which are really important on a film set right now. So the sets that I'm working on and have worked on, I'm just now starting to get back to work. I've got a couple jobs under my belt on a 3 to 5 days so far, is that most productions seem to be handling things really well. And what I'm seeing mostly is I'm seeing COVID testing in advance of crew members on at minimum a weekly basis. Some of the corporate jobs are doing more wellness checks rather than testing ahead of time. So it depends on the production, on the protocols here in the U.S. that are being done. And the other part is that I'm going to be doing additional units for 3 weeks coming up in a couple weeks on a feature I was working on before everything shut down. And they are requesting face masks, and then we have to wear the approved masks that they'll provide, and also face shields. So I think that's what they mean by the doubling up as far as that is concerned. So, I'm seeing excellent safety standards. You want to be open and communicate about that with production. What is expected? What is being done? How can I be a part of that? And don't be afraid to ask those questions, because it's a very important question to ask. The second part of that question, when handling 6 talents of wiring, if it sounds like maybe you're doing this job by yourself and it could be possibly a one-person sound crew situation, make sure you're communicating with production in advance on how much time you need to wire each talent and the steps that you anticipate will need to be taken in order to not only be safe, but also make sure that the wires that you're putting on the talent sound good, they look good for camera, and all of those elements. So it really comes down to communication. And the final thing I'll say about wiring talent, and this is just my experience because I can relate to that feeling of being new and being afraid. And I've let wires go on set early in my career that I knew weren't going to work because I was afraid that somebody might not like me on the set. And I realized real quick, it's not about that. It's not about being liked. It's about making sure that you're doing your role to the best of your possibility along with those other roles. Is approach it in a fun way. It just so happens that every wardrobe is a challenge. Just really try to pay attention to what are they going to be wearing? What are the costumes? Reach out to the costume designer if there is one. Hey, what kind of wardrobes are there? And have some ideas in advance and just have some fun with it. Because I think by approaching that attitude, being friendly and communicating, I think you're going to be surprised that you're going to get much better results than maybe you thought.
Good stuff. So I think that probably a face mask, if you can get, the shield, in addition to a mask would be a really good idea for ATN, in light of the circumstances there. And it sounds like it's a smaller budget kind of production. So another thing, if I can just answer that from a corporate video, we're actually getting ready to do our first shoots, and actually through COVID so far, I've just had basically. We've had the various people just submit their footage that they shot at home with their phones, and we have one coming up that's going to be more of a live stream format. And what we're doing is basically I'm delivering USB microphones to the office, leaving them there. They come pick them up, they take them home, then we get online and I talk them through how to set them up and stuff like that. So that doesn't really apply in this particular circumstance, but just so things are starting to pick up, but they're starting to pick up in a very different way than I'm used to working on them. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that pans out.
That's a really excellent example of innovative, approach, Curtis. I mean, I'm really impressed with that, actually. The fact, because that's not the first time I've heard about productions working in this new landscape where they're actually leaving these kits, per se, that could also include camera setups and light setups and allowing, and creating pathways for production to work in remote aspects is really an important point. And having that, knowledge about those kind of workflows and being savvy, I think, as far as how to approach, live situations or the best type of equipment setups when someone's going to be doing it themselves. So that's I really like that. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I actually have heard of some other productions too. I think it was in relation to, how Apple does their they have several meetings a year where they present their new products or whatever. And I think they did one relatively, when was it? In June, I think it was. So that was when, most productions were definitely shut down at that point. And I'd heard I think what I'd heard about in regards to sound was that basically the way they operated that was, and I think in those cases is a little different. They're not concealing the mics so much. They'll actually wear the mics on the outside of their clothing. So it's not as big of a deal. But they had put together some pretty detailed instructions that they sent to all the cast members ahead of time about how they were going to mount their own lavalier microphones. And so literally the mixer did a drop on the actual set and then stepped away to where they were actually, away from the set where they did the mixing. And so it was really kind of a situation. And actually, that's actually not too far from what I do a lot of times. So in corporate video, when you're wiring up a woman, a lot of times, if we are going to try and conceal the microphone, I just coach them on how to do it and send them away to the changing room where they go and they'll mount the microphone themselves. And the nice thing about that I found with women, if they're just wearing business attire, it's usually pretty straightforward. Like, attaching the lavalier with a clip to the back of their bra, pretty straightforward. I almost always get good results that way. and it's something that you can talk the crew or the cast member through pretty straightforwardly. So interesting stuff there. Okay, let's go take a look and see what else we've got here as far as questions are concerned.
Great.
Next up from Alan, are feature movies and shows ever all wireless? If so, what sort of gear is being used at this time for industry standard wireless? Are consumer products ever used? Any differences Michael Wynne employs for outdoor versus indoor? So it looks like a whole bunch of questions there for you, Michael.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the biggest challenges on a film set when working with wireless is you're working in an environment that has a lot of wireless going on. It's not just the wireless microphones that we use for the talents, also for the boom, and we also use wireless to send to Comtex, which are personal listening devices for the director, the producers, and the crew who need them. There's also wireless devices for focus pullers in the camera department. There's also wireless devices for lighting setups and lighting grids. So there's a lot of wireless going on, including all of the 2.4 gigahertz wireless for Wi-Fi on set and anything else that may be going on in that environment, including behind the scenes work. You could have EPK crews, and having a handle on everything that's going on wireless is the first step on any given set. From that point, typically 99% of the time for lav microphones on talents, everything is going to be wireless. Some of the common gear that you'll see on film sets for wireless microphones on higher end sets is going to be Electrosonics wireless. You're also going to see Zaxcom wireless. And in addition, you're going to see Wizicom wireless and also some Audio Limited, especially for the wireless boom. And the booms are also typically mostly wireless. Now, I say that cautiously because there are a lot of mixers still today who prefer to be cabled for the boom. And the reason is because even with today's technology and digital wireless, a cabled microphone still sounds better. And remember that we are capturing an art. It's not necessarily about convenience and latest, greatest tech as much as it is about getting the sound that represents the story. So that's what's going to come first. And every mixer that you work with on a film set is going to have their own preference on how to do that. You also have, we talked about the IFBs. Oh, the other wireless that happens on a film set is Teradex. Those are wireless video. And that's typically the brand that's used on film sets, and that is in the 5 gigahertz range. So with all of this RF energy happening on a larger scale film set, because I think that was a question, TVs and movies, that the front end of these wireless systems have to be very robust. So what that means is that one system in a environment like, let's say we're doing a live stream together like we are right now, I could probably get away with using a 2.4 gigahertz wireless system for this setup if I wanted to be wireless. But if I tried to duplicate this same setup on a film set that has all of this other wireless going on, I may run into some issues where I'm going to need a more robust front end. And what that front end does is it typically drives up the cost of the wireless because they used front end filtering on the systems and really advanced technology in the wireless to make it very robust and less prone to being interfered with from other wireless sources. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about filtering? Because this may be a new concept for some people that are used to using, for example, 2.4 gigahertz systems. What is filtering, and how do you?
It's a hot topic right now, and so to answer that question is, what filtering does is it uses high pass and low pass filters in a RF environment, typically in line on a 50 ohm coax cables, or it could be built into the front end of the receiver or the receiver antennas. And what it does is it filters out the surrounding RF energy from entering the front of your wireless receiver. Now, that energy, keep in mind, is going all along the RF landscape from the lower UHF megahertz to maritime bands all the way to 300 gigahertz. Up in there, all of your antennas don't care. All of that energy comes right into your antennas. And the receiver's job has to filter through all of that information and narrow in on that signal. So by adding the filters, whether they're an analog filter that you can purchase to put in line or it's built into the system like we had talked about, it lowers the noise floor. Because in RF, signal to noise is very similar to as it is in audio. So in audio, for instance, we want to have an excellent signal to noise ratio, meaning that we want the background level to be much lower than our source. So that way you have a good, solid audio signal. The same thing goes for RF, except it's important to distinguish that RF is not audio. RF is, electromagnetic radio frequency, but it still follows the same principle from signal to noise. So by filtering out these extraneous bands into your receiver system, it lowers the noise floor and gives you better signal to noise performance. And one of the things that is possible with that is sometimes you can put wireless where you would not be able to put it as a result of using these filters.
Okay. And that's a big topic, right? We could spend
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole
Yeah, but the concept is simple. The concept really is we're just getting, it's just like, for those of you who have used EQs in your mixes, which I think is all of us. I mean, all of us have some sort of EQs. You know that all of that low energy in your audio signal, that let's say you have a rock singer and everything below, 60, 80 hertz, you can roll off, and because that extra energy can interfere with your mix. It can muddle up your mix where your bass guitar is and your kick drum is. Then that won't be as clear. Same thing as with RF.
Okay, that makes sense. Very good. All right, let's go back here and take a look at our questions here and see if we got everything. That was a multi-part one with a lot of pieces.
Yeah, it's a good question
from Alan there. Oh yeah, is there anything you do differently, Michael, for indoor versus outdoor when you're running wireless?
Well, you're going to have a lower noise floor typically in an indoor environment, so it's less challenging in an indoor environment. The only thing I would say to that is I wouldn't put it past me to do an additional scan once I get outside. Because I've had channels on interiors and I went outside, especially in congested RF areas with radio towers and a bunch of stuff going on, and wasn't able to get usable frequencies from that same coordination.
Okay. So when you make the switch, then it's time probably to do a rescan and make sure everything's...
There's going to be a higher RF floor and more activity because the walls of a building, depending upon the building, can take down that RF noise floor and work to your advantage.
Yep, good. Okay. All right. Thanks for that one, Alan.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Let's take a look and see.
That's a good question. Yeah, I would have never thought of even suggesting that.
Yeah. Okay, so next up, we're moving kind of a little bit out of wireless at this point. So we did get a number of questions that were more general audio oriented. And the next one up from Edward is, what lav mics using Rode Link would voice close to a Rode NTG5? And I don't know, Michael, if you have... So basically, it sounds like he's using the Rode Link 2.4 gigahertz wireless system and wanting to kind of choose, and that comes with the Rode lavalier microphone, wanting to choose a boom mic that's kind of, would cut pretty nicely with that. Do you have any input on that?
Now go back to that question. Is he comparing the two?
Well, I think he wants
Sonic,
to...
or just trying what matches?
I think, yeah, what would be a good boom mic to look at to cut well with the Rode Link system? So, for example, when you're using a Sanken COS 11D, how does that influence your choice of boom mic? Which one? Same kind of thing there, I think.
Yeah, that's a really well thought out question, and I like that because matching lavs, the sound of lavs and the sound of the boom is a common topic and something that has come up in the past. And you'll hear mixers say, "I really like how this lav matches this boom." The only way you're going to ever determine that is you got to put your ears on it. I don't use the Rode Link system. I haven't heard the Rode Link system. Not that I'm aware of. I may have been watching a video online when I was listening to it. But, typically the short shotgun microphones, your super cardioids, are going to outperform your lavs. They have inherently a lower noise floor, and they typically have a better frequency response. There's a lot of advantages to that over the lavs. And that's a good starting place. I mean, definitely, I would think that Rode maybe has thought that through. That say, hey, if you're matching it, like let's say a DPA 4017B, you would think the first thing you would probably want to do is look in the DPA lav line to see what's a good match for that. I always felt the COS 11 was an excellent match for the MKH50. I thought they both kind of cut well together, even though there was more shotguns or lavs that maybe I prefer the sound of. To me, consistency kind of outweighed that.
It makes sense, definitely. And, that's an interesting point, too. I think in regards to lavaliers, the Sanken COS 11D it's a staple. I mean, I think you'll see that mic in a lot of places. And I'll be honest, it sounds horrible on my voice. I don't like it, but what it does do pretty nicely is it does seem like while it can sound pretty harsh, it usually EQs pretty nicely. Like you can pull it around and push it in post a little bit in different ways, and you can get it sounding pretty close to other stuff. But as far as the question here, specifically Rode lavalier and the NTG5 seems like a pretty good place to start from, based on my experience with those two microphones. So
that's good to know.
Yeah. So thanks for those insights there, Michael.
Sure.
All right. Next up is from Ewan. So again, this is not wireless related, but a good question nevertheless. I'm starting to try and record some audio of the surroundings where I photograph, sometimes for a time-lapse video and sometimes to accompany a set of still images. And I've got myself a Zoom F6 recorder and some, I'm not even sure how you pronounce these exactly, LOM UC Pro mics with windshields. And I did look those up, and just for your background information, I believe those are omnidirectional pencil condensers.
Nice.
I often find that even if I can't hear any traffic noise in the location of where I'm photographing and recording, it's often noticeable in my recording when I listen back at the computer later. I have a copy of the Reaper DAW program for editing, but have yet to learn to use many of its functions. Is there much you can do when editing audio to try and remove some of these lower frequency traffic sounds from field recordings of the more natural sound of the environment you're trying to capture? Rather than people's voices, I'm trying to record sounds such as hail bouncing off of a metal gate during a thunderstorm, waves and seabirds, and long grass rustling in the wind.
I love this guy. Like, I want his job. I mean, I want to go record rustling and banging of things. I mean, it sounds like a dream. And it's a great question. Curtis, you made an excellent point when you read that. Did you say that the microphones that he's using with that are omnidirectional?
If I understood correctly, yeah, it looks like those are Omni mics. Okay.
So the first thing that I would say is use a directional cardioid or super or hypercardioid. Now remember, that's the supercardioid will have the most narrow pattern and the cardioid will have the widest. But an omnidirectional, remember, records from all directions. And that can have advantages for like lav microphones per se, where you would actually want that. But for when you're trying to record the nature sounds and you have the traffic behind you, that would be my first suggestion. And the second part of that, and before I go to the second part, research also stereo recording techniques, because stereo imaging can change how it is that we experience a space. There's nothing worse to me than a mono ambience recording of anything. And omnidirectional, however, can do spaced A-B pairs, which are really, really cool, and they can have excellent low frequency response. So you can do A-B type recording, spatial recording, which I've attempted like twice, and do stereo. So I don't want to say you can't do stereo with Omni, because you can. But for the traffic noise question, using like an XY configuration or an ORTF is probably the most superior stereo image. But you can run into mono compatibility for film landscapes, but it doesn't sound like this is what this is for. So if you're in control, it's a stereo imaging using an ORTF, two microphones that are at least cardioid, and spacing them out will eliminate most of that. The second part of the question, is there a software program that can remove that? No. The answer is flat out no, and don't let anyone ever tell you that. Because although you can get away with a lot of this stuff in dialogue as far as removing it, the type of thing that you're doing is you're creating, and why I'm jealous of your job, is a beautiful landscape experience. You need to capture that as true as you can. And the other thing that I will throw out to you as a suggestion, once you get the microphones that you like and you get them positioned the way that you want, is maybe think about, does what you're recording sonically, is that the best place for where your picture is at? So meaning that your cameras might be set up in one particular area for your photography, obviously because visually it's the best, but can you do an audio recording separate? Maybe it's 100 yards down the mountain or something like that, to cheat for that, to get rid of some of that background noise. So the location of the mics. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think those are some great insights. The only other thing I would answer to or add is to that is microphone position. So if you do, if you can identify where the traffic sound is coming from, use your directional mic to your advantage there. Put the least sensitive part of the mic towards the traffic sound, which will help a lot as well. Kind of get you that clean recording there.
Now the supercardioids actually have a tighter rear rejection pattern, right, Curtis? Versus the cardioid or hypercardioid. I know it's a narrower front, but does it also have a narrower rear?
It's got a little tail. So of course the cardioid has basically no tail, and then when you get to super, you've got a little bit of a tail, and then when you get to hyper, it's the tightest on the front, but it also has kind of a longer lobe on the back. So
maybe
really
cardioid is the best for rear rejection.
Yeah, it seems like when you're doing stereo that cardioid makes a lot of sense. So.
Also, a flat frequency response is another thing to talk about with microphones. So I was watching, I really enjoyed the Sound Summit. I don't know if you caught that up, Curtis, but I especially appreciated DPA talking about the frequency response of the 4017B versus 4017C and how it's got that boost around 5K, and they've kind of got the 4017B, which is still kind of a flat sounding microphone, hyped up a little bit for dialogue capture, where the 4017C actually has a smoother frequency response across almost all the way to 90 degrees. It's the exact same. So I think for like ambience recordings in this case, that could actually really help with the imaging, because if you have a changing frequency response on the polar pattern, then I don't want to hear more high end front and center than I do to the right. What you're looking for is an accurate recording. Yeah. And, with as much low end, I'd imagine, is possible too in that scenario.
Agreed. Yeah. And that's really what it's about there. Like if you're doing nature stuff, nature ambiance, you just really want, nature is the part that's the beautiful part there. You want to let it shine. And so that means, realistic capture as much as possible.
And look into the ambisonics too, because you could do ambio for that kind of work too, which would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Because with the Mix Pre 3, you can do the ambio, and then Sennheiser has some tetrahedral microphones. So does, which are it's basically two XY capsules in some configuration of each other. I don't know. Yep. And then Rode has one too, right, Curtis?
Yep. There's Soundfield, I think they call it the SF1. Yep.
Just thought,
Interesting stuff. Interesting. Okay, back to the questions here. Let's see where we're at. Luigi, this one's going to be a tough one, but maybe Michael has some insights too, but we can talk a little bit about it. I'd like to couple my Sony a7S III with a decent mic preamp or potentially a recorder. I own a couple of Mix Pre, the Tascam DR701D, but I'm searching for a small and very portable solution to couple with a shotgun mic and a wireless lav for run and gun videos. How would you rate the Sony XLR K3M, which I believe is basically an XLR adapter that you can put on top of your Sony a7S III, little hybrid mirrorless camera there. It seems to be a practical solution as far as size is concerned. Still, it isn't a recorder, I think is what he means. And then any other suggestions? So I don't know.
That's the adapter that allows you to put XLR inputs into that mirrorless camera?
Exactly. Curtis? Yeah.
I like this guy's setup. And that a7S III is like a powerhouse. From what I've seen, that looks amazing, and it's not cheap either.
Nope. Nope.
I mean, the Mix Pre 3, you can obviously mount on the bottom of that camera. That would be my first suggestions. Use the Mix Pre 3. I'm not too familiar with the Tascam product, but it sounds like it's good too. Just whatever you can get your rig to mount would be excellent. You're going to get a better performance out of the Cashmere preamp than you are the adapter for the Sony a7S III. However, then you're going to run into other things you have to worry about, like battery, power, all that kind of stuff. So it really comes down to how you prefer to configure your rig. And I think the other question was really talking about, like, he was going to have like a boom on one channel and a lav on the other. Is that right, Curtis? Or
That's what I read. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously a very practical and common approach that has been happening for years, where an ENG camera, is going to have the shotgun microphone where you're going to want the ambience, which is critical because especially in editorial and what you're doing, you don't have anything, that can be really kind of deaden out your sound experience. Or if it's the internal microphone, obviously this person doesn't want to do that. But you could do the boom on one side and then lav on the other, and then just your choice of. Sounds like they already have a wireless system, Curtis. Is that right?
Sounds like it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my advice is do what works for you. At a certain point, it's about ergonomics and it's about accomplishing the goal, because everything that you mentioned is quality. Everything that you mentioned is going to work. So it really comes down to what works for you. I mean, I put my Mix Pre 3 on my GH5s, Curtis, and I'll be honest with you, it's a pain in the rear. Because what I have to do, because my battery is on the underside of the thing. Yep. So I've been thinking for the stuff I'm shooting, I want to get a cinema camera because I want those XLR inputs. But at the same time, you can mount even the GH5 has the XLR. It's never ending. But I think the question comes down to, are you getting the results that you need, and are the ergonomics, because if you're fiddling around changing a battery and disassembling a Mix Pre 3 from a camera to get to a battery of a GH5, as I like bang up my setup for doing that. When I did the stereo video for the Sanken CMS 50, which I highly recommend, by the way, it's an incredible experience. But anyway, you could miss a shot. So you're filming a documentary or something like that that's happening in the moment, and you miss a shot. You're set up. The heck with that Mix Pre 3. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
Do what's on. So hopefully that makes sense. At a certain point, you got to do what works for you.
I agree. And on the flip side, I'm going to bet that Sony a7S III doesn't have analog limiters. So if you're doing a run and gun documentary, there's an advantage to the Mix Pre as well. And so and those Sony cameras typically, those run through batteries pretty quickly. So you're probably going to have an external battery solution of some sort anyway.
Is it underneath, Curtis?
Yeah, it's underneath.
Oh, so it's just like
it's just the same.
The same. Can you even mount those Mix Pre 3s on top? I guess you could.
Well, that's
weird. It starts getting weird.
I think the best suggestion I've seen is use a quick release system between the Mix Pre and the camera. That way you can pop it off really quickly, swap out batteries, boom, back on, and you're back in business. So
I'm gonna take that and learn that from you. I saw a mixer with a quick release system on a Kantar X3 to go between two carts. I thought that was pretty awesome.
That's pretty cool.
For a camera. I forget, a Swiss mount, I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Wow. All right, let's get back into the questions, see what else we got here. Next up from Richard, bought a Zoom F8 based on your review about the course, which was pivotal in my quickly using the Zoom F8N. You're the only YouTuber I bother consulting. You should be consulting Michael, Sound Speeds. There's some other guys out there, podcasters. There's a lot of good guys out there that know some stuff about audio. I consistently use dual channel recording, and it has saved my bacon on numerous occasions. A guy recently challenged me on a Facebook group saying, it is better to use a Y cable and record on 2 tracks via cable than trust digital dual channel. My results have been satisfactory. Would you suggest I test a Y cable on my mic to 2 tracks, or is the dual channel on the F8N not digital? And that is to say, adequate quality. All right. I don't know, Michael, do you know anything about the F8N and the block diagram for the F8N?
So just so I understand, Curtis, because I know you're familiar with that machine, and this is probably a better question for you. Is it a digital out, or is that what?
Well,
versus a Y cable? What does that mean?
so there's a feature where you can plug a microphone, say for example, into channel 1, and then channel 5, you can also record that same, basically route that same microphone to channel 5 and record it at a lower gain trim setting.
Oh, okay.
And so it's it's dual channel, or a lot of times it's called safety recording. And the idea is if you don't have a high quality analog limiter, well, you can do this instead if you've got the extra channels available.
Oh, kind of like a camera does, where you send it into one input and then the other channel can be discrete, set at a different trim.
Exactly.
And then the guy that he was talking to was saying that he should use a Y cable, and that's wrong.
Yeah. So I think what it comes down to, it depends on what the F8N is doing. It depends on if it's digitally attenuating the second channel, which I think some of the lower end devices will do. But I'm 99% sure that what the F8N is doing is, because when you turn on that dual channel, it's actually taking up two discrete preamplifiers. It's actually using both of them. So
which is what you wanted to do. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's basically just using a single microphone input and then routing that to both of the preamplifiers and gain staging them at different levels. So I think you're fine on the F8N. If you were talking about one of the lower end, little handheld recorders, that would be a different story. If it's just doing digital attenuation like some of them do, then yeah, a Y cable would be a better approach. But I think in the case of the Zoom F8N, you're fine without a Y cable.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, if it's working for you, like, then just do that. You got doers, and then you got people who are commenting on other people doing. So it's like, which one do you want to be, right?
That is a very good point, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up, especially on Facebook groups. So, yeah. Okay, back to the questions here. All right. Looks like next from Art. I use an Electro Voice RE320 dynamic mic. When I turn up my Scarlett 2i2 interface up to get more gain, I also get some noise. A cloud lifter would give me more gain, but for not much more, I can get a DBX 286, which has some other features. What are your thoughts? So, Michael, this might be a really good question for you. Your background with studio gear, especially you've put some analog outboard gear to use. What's your thought?
Well, he's using an RVE 320, not the RE20.
Yeah, so the 320 is it's a slightly less expensive but a similar design dynamic microphone.
Oh, this is cool. I'm learning new stuff by these questions. I mean, it sounds like the issue is in the preamp, not the microphone. So when he's trying to drive the dynamic microphones they require a lot of gain. And so the preamp that you use is going to need to be able to drive a dynamic microphone well. And I don't know, I definitely wouldn't get that DBX device to solve this issue, because that sounds like another audio interface without looking at it. Or is that a channel strip,
no,
Curtis? Am I wrong?
It's a channel strip. So it's a vocal channel strip. It's really popular amongst podcasters and that kind of thing.
Then
so
maybe it's good. Yeah,
so
I don't know what the specs are yet.
It's got a compressor. I'm actually looking at one right here. It's got a compressor, a de-esser. You can do some kind of low end and high frequency sweetening with some, they call them enhancers. And then there's also a noise gate expander. So it actually does have a pretty good preamp. It supplies up to, I think, 60 dB of gain, I think. Not 100% sure on that, but that would be...
So what it sounds like, I mean, that's a better question for you, Curtis. I mean, is he going to get a better performance out of that mic preamp with that?
Yeah, I think that would probably be a better choice than... a mic activator, but because if you're doing a lot of spoken word type stuff and you're especially live streaming, if you're live streaming, you get one chance to make it right. You don't have post when you're live streaming. And so being able to apply a little bit of compression, maybe a little de-essing and things of that nature, seems to me the DBX 286 would be a good option.
Now, he's using this for live streaming, Curtis, for his own channel?
That's not clear. He didn't specify.
Okay. Because the other option is just use a large diaphragm condenser microphone. It seems like, I think it's worth saying that, you always see the SM7B on, every YouTube channel. It's almost cliche. Like, I remember when that microphone was cool until it became the YouTuber special. And, the dynamic microphones obviously have the advantage of, poor room acoustics. So they obviously have their place, and it's an excellent sounding microphone that I loved when I used to use it for rock singers.
Yeah.
And, cutting demos or stuff like that. It was used a lot in recording studios for anything that was a high SBL in an environment that maybe was not going to be suited for a large diaphragm condenser. But, it could be as simple as changing out the microphone is what I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. So a couple of options there for you, Art.
Yeah.
I think Art, I thought I saw you here earlier. If you're still here, if you could clarify if you're doing live versus recording. I think if you're doing recording, then the mic activator, like a cloud lifter or a fed head or whatever, that may help you out. That may be a viable option as well. So just depending on what you're trying to do. All right, back to the questions. We're running a little tight on time here, so we're gonna go quickly.
We're
here.
gonna be quick. Cool.
Yep. Jean-Francois asks, I have a question about how to best monitor live webinars. And this is one that you just did, Michael. So hopefully this will be a good one here. Here's my workflow. I'm using an ATEM Mini for a Zoom webinar. I have a Zoom ZDM1 microphone to XLR input on a Sony NextCam X80 into HDMI 1 on the ATEM. Using Mic 1 for music. And he has some an inexpensive field monitor, a video monitor on the HDMI ATEM output. So he says, I can balance all the ATEM audio using the field monitor output to my headphones. As a one-man show, however, I need to be able to interact with the other presenters and attendees. I have a great Logitech speakerphone to listen to the webinar sound, but then cannot monitor music or YouTube levels live. While I can deal with the ZDM1 in frame, I am looking for a solution where I don't wear visible headphones. I can switch and or mix both my outgoing mix as well as the webinar audio in. Would you recommend an earpiece that most live musicians use today, and how would I achieve control of the mix going to the one earpiece? So that's a pretty complex...
I'm giving that to you, Curtis.
That one's mine. Okay. Well, here's the thing. Jean-Francois, it's a challenge. If you're doing it all on your own, I don't know of a good solution. You could have a little mixer where you're getting a feed from the ATEM that you can kind of switch back and forth, and then so you can every once in a while switch back and hear what's coming out of the program output from your monitor. You'd have to use probably an HDMI. There are HDMI audio extractors, so you'd probably need something like that to feed the audio back into your mixer, and then you'd feed the mixer into the stream as well, and you'd need to get the audio back out of your computer into the mixer as well. So it's a pretty complex setup. I don't know of a simple way to do that, but it's going to take some pretty creative work on that, and we may need to look at that a little closer. So the audio, your mixer is probably going to need to be an audio or connected to an audio interface as well, so you can get that audio back from the computer, the Zoom meeting. Any thoughts, Michael? Am I headed down the right path, do you think?
I mean, it sounds like I'm not very familiar with I just got the ATEM Mini myself, but I'm running all the audio through the Mix Pre 3. So I will say, all I can do is just relate from my personal setup, because I recently had done, a workshop with video playback and also live keynote, all these different types of things. And, the challenge I had was the same thing. It was monitoring as well, and someone gave me a suggestion to wear IFB, which sounds like that's what they're leaning towards, to make sure. And there's two sources always with live to think about. There's, the source you're sending out, but then there's a source that's actually happening, the mix source. And, I did not a workshop, but a live stream with a streamer mixer guy, Paul Katzman, and he would monitor his return on another channel on the mixing board. So he would be monitoring, and I know some of the programs out there give you that option to actually monitor your stream as well. So
we'll do that.
Hopefully that's helpful. And then the other thing is, don't be afraid to simplify. I think that was one of the biggest I mean, I found myself in a situation a couple times these last few weeks where I overcomplicated it. And I
Hmm.
know not to do that, but sometimes it comes down to keeping, because if you're a one man band, you're going to have, it's sometimes it's worth to maybe take to keep it more simple.
Hmm.
What do you think about that, Curtis? Does that
I
like
agree. Yeah,
resonate or?
it does. And I'll be honest. So right now, I'm listening to you. I can hear,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
That's what these headphones do. We have a director here. The director is monitoring the program output from the ATEM. And
Oh,
so, having another person, I mean, that's the biggest thing. If I think about a large budget production,
yeah.
what's the most expensive thing? What's the biggest part of the budget for a large budget production?
Ooh.
It's
Talent?
cast and crew.
Yeah,
It's yeah,
cast.
it's cast and then
Cast
it's crew.
and then crew. Yeah.
And then the cheap stuff is, renting all the kits, renting the lighting, the
Yeah.
camera and all that stuff. That's the cheap stuff. So what my point with that is that sometimes maybe one person is not going to get you everything you need. You might need to go and have another person helping you out and monitoring one of those while you're doing the other,
That's right.
so
and
that's
and
what
they're
we,
there and they're there for you. Like I
yeah.
think if you're streaming, whether it's your channel or your content that you're creating, they're really going there for the experience
Hmm.
of whether it's the information, like we're talking about wireless today and doing different things on your channel, Curtis. And I think that's what's paramount. And sometimes too much tech, and if something's too difficult for a one man band, you got to pull back. And it also plays for those of you working in professional audio is knowing when to tell these producers, we need an additional for that. We need a three. That's not a one man band.
Hmm.
I was recently in a CAS event where they were talking about that. Some of these mixers, it took years for them to learn to say, you know what? That's not a one person crew, because it
Right.
can put you in a situation where it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing.
Hmm.
When in fact, all it was that you didn't have the proper uh, people. I mean, because when I was doing the live stream that was just talking head playback for the last gig I told you about, I mean, we had a crew of like 10 people just for like, and all I had to do was mix,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was great because it wasn't all of the juggle, but
Yeah.
sometimes
That
the
was
juggle can be fun. It can be challenging though, too.
right. I imagine that was refreshing for you, right? I mean, I
That was
can
great.
just mix.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
it's because everything is an art form. From it's really cool. It's actually a whole other topic, and a really good question. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And just in-ear monitors are another option there too. Just so you're
Yeah.
aware. I've had good luck. I've got just a pair of the Shure, the model number, I think it has a 215 in it or something. It's about a 80 to
Yeah.
$100 set of in-ear monitors. That's another option too if you don't want to see bigger
Hmm.
headphones like this. So, all right, how are we doing on questions? We're done with that one. There was another one that came in as a super chat. Let's pop that up here real quick. I know we're over time here, but we just need to talk here. Mother B asks, is there hardware to prevent loopback or echo during live stream using Ecamm with Rodecaster hooked to a Mac? Michael, you want to take a first shot at that?
That's all you, Curtis. The Roadcaster is your thing, man. I've seen you got good videos on that. I know.
Yeah, so Ecamm and Rodecaster. Is there hardware to prevent it? Well, the Rodecaster, I don't know if you're talking about the microphone or the Rodecaster Pro, like the little mixing board. I don't. I think it's probably the Rodecaster, the mixing board you're talking about. It does have a mix minus built into it, but it sounds like somehow you're getting an echo. I want to say this, Mother B, if you would please email me, curtis@learnlightandsound.com. Let's kind of take this one offline and see if we can sort this out for you.
Could
I
be
think
a
that was,
multitude of things, right?
yeah, I think there's a little bit more going on there, but I appreciate that, and let's see if we can get you headed the right direction there. Man, we had a good audience today, and a lot of questions there. Michael, anything else you want to say before we wrap things up here?
No, that was great. I always learn something from these. So I appreciate everyone, asking questions, and Curtis, for you having me here, because, that's what's so great about doing these things as a community, because you're always learning or thinking about something that really, you hadn't thought about. So I just want to say thank you to everybody.
All right. Yes, thanks everybody. And get out there, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Talk soon.